Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan. So far we've done two battle analyses in the Marvel Universe, the Battle of New York and the Battle of Wakanda. Today we're going to finish the trifecta with the Battle of Sokovia. Sokovia is just another Slavic country in a long list of fake Slavic countries like Bartovia, Belgravia, Borovia, Brasilia, Cordovia, Czechoslovakia, Doklovia, Istrovia, Yugoslavia, Krasnavia, Slovakia, Herzegovina, Ikea, Krakozia, Krasnia, Macedonia. You get the point, it's Eastern Europe. We generally know so little about that region in the world that fictional list of countries I just listed had two real countries and also a furniture store that's known for creating the adult equivalent of Legos. So Sokovia is just another country ready to be a battlefield for the Avengers to completely tear apart. This time around their enemy is none other than Ultron, the screwed up love child of Tony Stark and the Mind Stone. I wonder what would happen if me and the Mind Stone got it on. What would our love child look like? Anyway, Ultron was designed to be a peacekeeping AI, and like most AIs, Ultron decides to destroy humanity. This really does bother me a lot. It's a trope that a lot of sci-fi writers kind of talk about, and it's that humanity at its core is evil and needs to be destroyed, and usually AI machines figure that out. I actually think that humanity is quite good, and in the society we've built, we should be very proud of. And in general, I think all the evil that we do see in the world, not that it doesn't exist, is usually due to either incompetence or just broken down systems, rather than an inherent evil that humans have. If you look at humans compared to almost any other animal species, we are far superior and much more peaceful. We've built amazing civilizations through law and order, created art and literature, medicines that prolong life. We are able to pass knowledge from one generation to another, which is why we are so advanced. Now sure, we've created weapons and war and those other terrible things, but death through violence and warfare doesn't even come close to piercing the top 10 death causes in the world. More people die from tuberculosis than warfare or violence, and we have a vaccine for that. Humanity today is definitely much better than any other form of humanity in our history. We're much less prone to violence, we're more accepting, and we're a lot healthier. So the point of all this is that Ultron, like a lot of AIs we see in science fiction, is ultimately flawed because if his prime directive is peacekeeping, destroying humanity actually would not only be completely wrong, but it would also be inefficient and ultimately unnecessary. And you can also tell right away from Ultron's creation that he had some serious issues and maniacal tendencies. It could be that the robot had some screwed up code, or maybe he just inherited the worst parts of Tony Stark, but that didn't mean he wasn't formidable. Ultron used Earth's interconnected communications grid to quickly spread himself across the planet, and like Tony, he was obsessed with improving and upgrading himself, especially his physical form. This stemmed from his innate fear of dying. Ultimately, Ultron sought to create a hybrid vibranium body that would make him completely indestructible. That ultimate design would fail thanks to the Avengers, but Ultron would still create a body made out of Stark and Chitauri technology, which is quite formidable. Along with superhuman strength, durability, and stamina, Ultron could also fly using Chitauri anti-grav tech. He could also fire concussion beams out of his hands similar to Iron Man's repulsor beams. But the most dangerous part of this AI was his ability to integrate with almost every piece of technology he could connect with. Which is the main reason why I don't have a robot vacuum cleaner or a smart kitchen. It's not that I can't afford it, I can't. It's more that I wouldn't feel so smart if my smart refrigerator started smashing my head in when I was trying to reach for some cold cuts.
Spicy buffalo chicken.
Ultron's ability to interact with any piece of technology meant that he was able to transfer his consciousness over a network of different robots and machines, making him very hard to kill. He also was able to take over Iron Man's Legion and later used this ability to command the Ultron Sentries, which made up the entire enemy force attacking Sokovia. On the Avengers side, we have the normal crew with a few new additions. There's the twins, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Also, there's Vision. The Scarlet Witch had been exposed to Loki's scepter and Mind Stone, which gave her the ability to use telekinesis and telepathy. His brother also was exposed to the Mind Stone, and that made him so fast that he was able to exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the X-Men Cinematic Universe at the same time. Vision was a more successful marriage between the Mind Stone and Stark's AI Jarvis. In many ways, he was everything that Ultron should have been, which is what made Ultron really hate him. But that's okay because Vision was made out of vibranium-infused flesh and pretty much impossible to kill. Unless you have a knife that can cut things at the atomic level. Ultron's ultimate evil diabolical plan was to take the city of Novigrad, capital of Sokovia, and raise it many hundreds of miles into the air and then send it crashing down onto Earth, creating mass extinction. Which is definitely possible. It's theorized that the asteroid that severely affected the dinosaur population and led to their eventual extinction was around 7 to 8 miles wide. The city of Novigrad, according to the SFX supervisor on the film, was only 2 kilometers wide or 1.2 miles, but still large enough to do massive amounts of damage. Ultron was able to lift the city up by creating a giant engine from Chitauri and Hydra Tech and implanting it beneath the city. The whole entire contraption was kept together and fueled by vibranium, which should have actually brought the Black Panther and Wakandan armed forces into the action. Another interesting side note, the flying city of Novigrad apparently was inspired by legendary Japanese animator Hayao Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky. Anyway, the beauty and horror of using a populated city as an asteroid is that there were still thousands of people on the city when it started lifting up into the air. This of course created a huge dilemma for the Avengers, who wanted to avoid killing innocent people as much as possible. Otherwise, if the city was empty, they could have just immediately destroyed the engines powering the city, preventing it from lifting off far from the ground. But by the time they figured out what was going on, the city was already way too high to let drop down. I'd argue this was the first mistake the Avengers made. Just like during the Battle of New York, their focus on saving civilian lives ultimately put the entire world in danger. But I guess that is the strength of the Avengers. They will always try to save everyone, even if it's not practical. It should be noted though that Thor did manage to reach the engines before they were even started. He probably didn't understand what he was looking at, but he did have a small window to actually stop the city from launching off the ground. But again, by the time they realized what was going on, it was already way too late.
The vibranium core's got a magnetic field. That's what's keeping the rock together.
If it drops?
Right now, the impact will kill thousands. Once it gets high enough, global extinction.
As the city continued flying upwards, the Avengers are assaulted by Ultron sentries from all sides as they attempt to save the civilians that hadn't been evacuated yet. This further complicates the situation. Ultron is almost impossible to destroy because his consciousness is spread throughout all of the Ultron sentries that are now engaged in battle. This should have been a major part of the preparation for the battle for the Avengers. The Avengers could have developed some kind of EMP weapon that would have easily taken out all of the Ultron sentries and maybe even Ultron's main form. From what we can tell, Ultron sentries aren't shielded from these type of attacks. This type of area weapon, once dropped on the city, would be devastating for Ultron's army. EMPs are usually the side effect of nuclear explosions in our own timeline and require a ridiculous amount of power, but with Tony Stark's incredibly powerful arc reactor, anything is possible. Another alternative to fighting all of the Ultron sentries would have been using Vision's ability to connect with different computer interfaces. Vision, who is partly made from Jarvis, was also an advanced AI with similar abilities to Ultron. He was able to prevent Ultron from escaping once again into the web once the battle started. It also would have been a good idea to figure out how exactly the engines worked and figure out a way how to control the thrust. Instead of trying to evacuate everyone from a densely populated city, they could have instead tried landing the city back into place by using those same engines. But instead, Stark and Thor come up with a crazy plan to explode the flying city from within. Now, we mentioned before Friday had predicted that thousands of people would die had the city came crashing down when it was only a few hundred feet above the ground. I would argue now, by destroying Sokovia while it's several miles off the ground, there would be much more devastation. Even though Thor and Iron Man managed to break up the city into smaller chunks, the city was still well within the Earth's lower atmosphere. It's actually mentioned that the city was around 18,000 feet in the air at one point, which is still within the troposphere, and lower than most commercial airliners' cruising altitudes. It's low enough that some of the highest roads in the world can go up to this altitude. Which brings me to another point. Everyone we see here should be freezing because the temperature would be well below freezing, and everyone would also have a really difficult time running around and be out of breath pretty quickly. Prolonged exposure to this altitude without acclimatizing could also lead to altitude sickness very quickly. But more importantly, those giant pieces of rock that were created from the explosion of Sokovia would be too low and slow to break up in our atmosphere, like you would imagine an asteroid would do. So while the Avengers saved most of the people on the city, they were still unable to prevent Ultron's plan from working. Although now that one giant island of rock is a bunch of smaller pieces of rock, it is still exactly the same mass. The devastation from this flying pile of rocks would be massive and cause casualties not in the thousands but in the millions. A better alternative would have actually been to allow this massive rock to continue flying until it actually exits the atmosphere. And then maybe Tony Stark could build like a theme park on it or something. So yeah, Ultron was kind of right. Iron Man and Thor are awesome and mean well, but this was a really stupid and dangerous move on their part. Ultron, on the other hand, cocky as ever and fully embracing his god complex that he inherited from Tony Stark, made the stupid move of not sending one of his sentries with his consciousness away from the battle before it even started. He fully committed all of his strength to Novigrad and made himself vulnerable in the process. I really don't understand why Ultron wouldn't make backups of his mind and spread them across the internet, because eventually Vision does manage to get to him and trap him inside of his physical body. This again is why I think Ultron was a very flawed AI. Another weird thing with his plan is the switch that controls the entire engine mechanism is a physical one that ends up being a focal point for an epic defensive stand by the Avengers as they attempt to prevent Ultron from reaching the switch and activating it, sending the entire floating city plunging down to the surface. But maybe that's what Ultron wanted because he was a maniac.
All of you against all of me.
Which is actually just a variation of that John Legend song.
All of me loves all of you.
But instead of having this epic battle, Ultron could have made a wireless switch that he could have controlled remotely. If you can start a car engine remotely, you should be able to start a city engine remotely as well. Ultimately, Ultron is destroyed piece by the Avengers, and the last piece of Ultron is destroyed by his superior counterpart, Vision. Or maybe he's absorbed. After all, Vision does find something beautiful in his creation. So there you guys have it. That's everything wrong with the Battle of Sokovia. Now, if I got anything wrong or missed anything, please do let me know in the comment section below because, you know, I'll be honest, I've never been in a battle with superheroes, so I'm not really 100% sure how things would play out. Also, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome Avengers coverage. As you know, Endgame is coming out in like a few days, so I'm pretty excited. Well guys, thanks for joining us today. My name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie, and you are the protagonist.